Um, I don't really remember what Venerable Buddha Ghosa said about the Brahmavihāra. Um, I don't quite recall what is the orthodox interpretation of it. But I understand it and experience it as that kind of ideas or recollections that, or perceptions that once experienced put the mind in a very pleasant and relaxed and sunny kind of mental state. And so if we often encounter people like that in life, very pleasant people, or people who are always in a pleasant mood, calm and relaxed and helpful and generous and very, very nice people, as if they are so genuinely, so you could say that they have such mind as characterized by the features of the Brahmavihāra. It's also the sort of the benevolent archetype is usually celebrated in arts and literature and movies and television series. The very benevolent person who never does anything bad or harm someone or something like this. So it's that sort of archetype of the kind person, the good person, who is always in a very pleasant mental state, pleasant to see, pleasant to interact with, and so on and so forth. So you know what I mean. So that's it for me concerning mudita. It's like appreciation, and of course one of the main sources of happiness or contentment in life is to be appreciative, and how to be appreciative for what you have, or for whatever it is that you have, to be appreciative for the absence of harm or hardship as well. So most people think appreciation is related to having what you want, or getting what you want, or having something. But a more substantial form of appreciation is when you're appreciate not being harmed, appreciate the absence of pain. So that's also a whole different domain of possibilities of appreciation, because present time a lot of evidence in recent psychological research that it is a very important element or factor in satisfaction or contentment, and also its absence is associated with discontent and even crime. And so there are correlations between appreciation and its absence, or there is a correlation between appreciation or its absence with criminality, for example. So it's a very important factor for happiness and contentment and peacefulness on a mundane societal level. So these are the Brahmavihāra. Concerning the question about their relevance to practice, a very good question, because I don't quite really know how people meditate these. It's usually it's all about perception, about exposing the mind to positive states of mind, positive ideas, or being in the company of positive people. You hear this a lot even in common language. is that the positive person and the negative person. Also nowadays there is an expression toxic that is usually associated with men or male behavior. I don't like these sexist separations, but anyways, these are sort of like common expressions which describe something real, which is that the mind or perception is exposed to negativity. That's going to be certainly influenced to a degree or another by that kind of exposure. And so you could say that the Brahmavihārā is exposing the mind through meditation to positive experience or perception. And that's I don't really know. I never meditate on positive things like this, or I hear a lot about people who use the imagination to extend metta to themselves and then to others, and practices of that sort. They're actually very popular. I never really got to find much benefit in that kind of imaginative exercise. I don't like imagination so much. I always try to avoid using the imagination, especially in meditation. But anyways, there are these kinds of meditative, imaginative exercises by which one exposes the consciousness to positive and pleasant perceptions. But in real life, the equivalent to this is daydreaming. I read a lot about that many years ago, about the therapeutic impact of daydreaming in certain temperaments or kinds of personality, and how it basically evokes in the consciousness perceptions or experiences that lead to a mental state very similar to the Brahmavihārā. Basically a pleasantness of the mind and its gentleness and kindness and so on. So there are all sorts of different ways of what I personally do when I feel that this is the time for the Brahmavihārā, and that I will talk about this in a minute. What I like to do is to change my actual surrounding. As I mentioned, I don't like the imagination, so I would read something that is pleasant or that evokes pleasantness. I would call an old friend and have a heart-to-heart chat, or I would move out of seclusion and spend some time with nice people. That usually always works out. It always immediately evokes in the heart the perceptions and experiences of the Brahmavihārā. So, as to how to practice this or when to practice this, the Brahmavihārā could be. I know that there are some people who practice this a lot, but I think it's a very effective way of removing negativity from the mind, especially if you are a renunciate practitioner. Well, then you might enter in phases of negativity that are unexplainable. Also, even if you're not a renunciate practitioner, not people in general, and this is known to be more prevalent among women than men, that they enter in phases of negative emotion or state of mind that is completely so you couldn't find any reason for it. It seems to be like this unconditional arousal of negativity. And so the Brahmavihārā could be very, very useful in episodes like this. And especially as you make progress in this kind of practice, their efficacy could really become nearly immediate. Like it was astonishing impact on the state of mind, and sometimes lead to the reversal of negativity very, very easily. So it's recommended for those times when there is an accumulation of negative emotion, or negative emotion that or mental states that don't go away by themselves. And that usually also happens in moments when there is exposure to negativity. But sometimes, as I just mentioned, they happen without any reason. And in both cases, the Brahmavihārā are very effective in having these negative mental states removed, and sometimes even reversed to positivity. Now, of course, the danger of this is that you get addicted to it, especially if you become good at it. And I've seen this actually a lot, as I just mentioned, especially among a female practitioner. There's a very strong tendency to positive emotion and to use Buddhist practice for feeling good, basically. Now, this is of course a great thing that one reaches that level of attachment to the Brahmavihārā, but at the same time, sometimes negative states of mind and emotions they're actually very important, necessary, in order for the practitioner to delve a little bit deeper into the roots of their consciousness. So it's not always a bad thing when we experience negativity, and sometimes actually this is an invitation to open up to the unconsciousness and to its darker hidden roots. And so this is something that is a little bit intricate, and it's also important that we know how to be patient a little bit with negativity, and how to respond to it in a non-aversive manner, or not to see it always as something that is to be dispelled with, or as to take them personally, to regard them as features of our personality, as if there is any such thing as a permanent kind of personality. These are just states of mind that arise, and the fact that they arise at all indicates that they have deeper roots that we ought to investigate and examine, rather than just escape from or erase through the practices of the Brahmavihārā. And negativity in general is it's not only very rarely, like in extreme cases of criminal behavior and things like this, that they represent themselves as. What I mean to say is that most of the time negative emotions are indicative of something else, of something more substantial about our psyche, our innermost psyche. And the same applies to anger and even hate and more serious negative mental states or harmful mental states. These things are not necessarily what they are. They're usually hiding something else about our innermost psyche and about its karmic makeup. And that's what I mean by invitation to that they represent an invitation for us to learn about our consciousness more in depth. And so it's strange how these things work out sometimes, and you find that what you've always regarded as a problem of your personality, or a negative aspect, or a defect of your personality, turns out to be the exact opposite. And that anger, for example, could be a manifestation of a certain type of strength, or a certain type of confidence that you could if you would employ with wisdom or at least just understand rather than reject, then it might really lead to a significant transformation of personality where it's no longer anger, it's something else. And that's usually what it is in origin. If you don't fight it and if you don't reject it or don't escape from it with practices such as the Brahmavihārā, it might turn out to be something that's very important for a practitioner's moral and spiritual development. So there's a little bit of a danger associated with all that type of practices like the Brahmavihārā and metta meditation and all that. And that they may, especially as they prove their success and efficacy, they may solidify a person's idea about himself, about herself, that they have certain bad things and that the other qualities of personalities are good, and they begin to identify with the good and antagonize the bad in themselves. And this is very problematic because it means that they're basically holding on to a certain perception or idea about who they are as persons, as egos, even if the concept that they consecrate about themselves is a good one, and they're benevolent, that they're kind, with the qualities of the Brahmavihārā, they're very good. Everyone celebrates them. If you abide in the Brahma states of the Brahmavihārā continuously, you're like an angel. Everyone loves you, adores you. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're making any substantial moral or spiritual progress at all. It could be the exact opposite. And I think that's the reason the Brahmavihārā or perfection in them is not regarded in Pali literature as something that leads to a deliverance, it leads to a nibbana. There are many instances of this in the Pali Suttas where that cosmological ramifications of reaching the highest levels of attainment with the Brahmavihārā meditation that leads to rebirth in the Brahma Loka. It leads to rebirth. It doesn't lead to Bhava Nirodha. It doesn't lead to the extinction of the conditioned consciousness. And so so this is a very important point to keep in mind with the Brahmavihārā and with all other practices that are effective in removing negative mental states and negative emotion, including ritualistic practices, for example, like all sorts of different religious, ceremonial or rituals. They're very effective in making people feel good. I would go so far as to say even merit making, if it becomes something that you think replaces other forms of more substantial practice of self-purification and the transcendence of the conditioned mind, then that becomes a problem then. And I don't want this to be misunderstood, but there is a certain similarity between that spiritual insistence on feeling good all the time and holding on to good feelings all the time and identifying with the person that feels good and that feels clean and in the state of the Brahmavihārā all the time. There is a similarity between this and someone who holds on to the effects of drugs, for example, because various different kinds of drugs can also make people feel some sort of in a spiritual Gnostic kind of wholesome or benevolent feeling. So this is a problem too, and in the end, this is not awakening, and it's not real gnosis. This is just intoxication with good feelings, very much like as if by using these meditative methods or by using certain kinds of psychedelic drugs, one induces the consciousness to be in Deva, in the Deva Loka, like in a Deva sort of consciousness, an angelic kind of state. So that is not the way. This is the opposite, the opposition of negative mental states when one identifies with them, like hatred or anger, violence, so aggression, and so on. Well, they're equivalent to these extra good or angelic mental states, and both of them are leading away from the way, I believe.